That's right. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I'm AJ Malillo.
And I'm Steven Rambola.
And we got another week in the books. Steven, you're a final down, 2 more to go. How we rocking over there?
That is true. It is crunch time, obviously. So we're recording this on Wednesday. My next final coming up is Friday, 9 a.m. Excuse me. And then I have my last final this coming Monday, again at 9 a.m. And then after that, we are officially done first year of law school. So next time we chat, all of the great people that listen to this podcast, I will be officially a completed first year of law school down, which I am going to take a lot of pride in when it happens. But as Kobe would say, job's not done. What's there to be
Job's
excited
not
about?
done.
Job's not
No,
done.
there's a lot to be happy. There's a lot to be proud of, but certainly true. Job's not done. Plenty ahead.
Plenty ahead. So, and the first one I had went well. Not necessarily as not what I expected, but I did enough preparation. I was able to show up and do my thing. So I'm feeling really confident about the grades, about everything that we got coming in. A lot of momentum on the way out, and we'll pick it up on the way in for year 2. Keep it rolling and start getting into the good stuff. Hopefully, talking in court like this guy over here.
Soon enough. We're like you said, we're recording this on Wednesday. Tomorrow, I am conducting. Well, we'll see, because sometimes they get settled like right before the actual shindig happens. But I'm scheduled for my first official hearings in the court, so we'll see how they go. A little appeals, a couple summary offenses, so that should be a good time. I'm all done with finals. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. All wrapped up. 1 more to go. I'll tell you what. They say that the first year of law school, they scare you to death. The second year, they work you to death. And the third year, they bore you to death. And quite frankly, I can't wait to be bored, because work you to death is certainly true. I don't know if I was scared my first year. I could see why people say that, though. I could see why people would say it. Would you say that this first year of law school has scared you, Steven? Is that
No,
how you would put
I
it?
wouldn't say scary. If anything, I don't know, but I love this stuff. So after the first class, I was like, oh, this is exactly where I want to be.
Yeah.
Bring it on. I want the pressure. I want the stress. I want the cold calls. Like, this is literally, I signed up for it, So why should I be scared of it?
That's fair. And really quickly, before we get into our stories, I think that this is a good little point to note of how far you've come since we used to live together at Montclair State. I vividly remember us getting into an argument at the apartment that we shared in Lyndhurst, New Jersey.
There was many of those.
About cold calling, and how it's me, you, and our other roommate Nick, and I was the only one that said cold calling should be a practice. If you just prepare for class, you won't be scared. It's on you if you're anxious. And you and Nick just completely just did not want to have anything to do with that. You said I was completely wrong, and now you're sitting here 6 years later almost telling me how you were excited for the cold call. You said bring it on, and I want to just point the perspective shift. Now that you're actually in the situation dealing with the cold call, you would think it would change the other way. You would think I'd be the one that's feeling different about it, but I feel like I was vindicated in my belief of the cold call, and maybe, just maybe, you've turned yourself around, and I appreciate it.
100%, and I'll say this much, and I think there's a lot. Actually, this is a cool little thing to talk about briefly. First of all, in typical AJ Malillo fashion, even if it's 6 years later, he'll still get the "I told you so," which I love. I love that.
Hey, I hate to say I told you so, but when I'm right, I'm right. That's all I gotta say.
Nothing gets by this guy. So I think if you had asked me 6 years ago, my impression of the cold call was that it created a culture of anxiety and stress in the classroom. That was my perception of it. And so I think my resentment towards the cold call was how is anybody going to learn if they're sitting there, anxious, afraid? Maybe they're not the kind of person that likes to talk in class, afraid to get it wrong, whatever it might be. And then in those 6 years, you grow so much as a person, number one, but you learn that those experiences where it is truly and genuinely up to you. Nobody is there to save you. You know, the professor calls out your name. He didn't call anybody else. He's looking at you, and it's up to you. There's no lifeline, right? Teaches you a lot about respect in general and responsibility in general. And when I say respect, I think I mean respect for the other people that are counting on you to know the material. And so there's a lot of growth in that. And I think the cold call, genuinely, we should cold call kids. First grade, done. Jimmy, what's the third letter of the alphabet? Let's go. Like, you don't know it? Come on. It encourages learning. It really does. And I think as long as it's facilitated the right way, it's a tremendous tool in a classroom. So a complete 180, and I'm all in on the cold call.
Well, I'm going to push this really quick, and I think it's going to kind of go in with all the stories we have today. They've been doing this type of learning of law schools since law school has been invented, right? The cold call has been going on forever.
Yes.
And here's the thing, Steven. I think this is like the overall point of this show, at least for me today. Maybe people kind of got it right sometimes in the past. And when things go on for a really, really long time, maybe there's a reason for it. And the reason is that it works and it's good. And that's not always true. Now, I think we know that. I think we can point to things that went on for a really long time and we could say that was bad. Definitively. But I think that that's the exception and not the rule. And that's why it's so easy to point to it when you come across it, right? Let's put it this way. And I'll use the bright line shining example to prove this point. We all know slavery was bad. You would be hard pressed to find any individual on the street that would condone slavery of any kind, especially of a racial kind like we saw in our country. No one's going to sit here and defend that unless they're a brutal racist, right? That went on for a long time. Today, uniformly, we say that was bad. That doesn't mean that everything that goes on for a long time is bad. If anything, that, like I said, is an exception. We all point to it. We're not proud of it. We regret that we did it. But for the most part, most things that span the test of time are good. And they span the test of time because they do something for human flourishing. And just like all of the great attorneys of our past who sat in the same law school classes and dealt with the same on-call questioning, if not even harsher, and they became great attorneys who changed America, who did things like change the laws that were bad in our country. Maybe there's an actual reason for this. And instead of telling people just because you feel a little bit uncomfortable, we'll change the rules just for you, we should start telling people, no, adapt. We've pushed so much individuality and uniqueness and your personal experience. We've pushed that so hard in this country where you forget that, guess what? Normal is also okay. Doing what everybody else does and has done forever is okay, and it's good, and there's a reason for it. It's because it's good for people. And we'll get into the stories later, but Stephen, I know that cold calling might seem like this abstract idea for this, but it's not abstract at all. Because it's what creates a good lawyer. There's reasons for it. Guess what? Exactly like you said, other people in that classroom are counting on you when you're on call to know your stuff. Just like someday your client will be counting on you to know what you're talking about when a judge asks you a question, whether your client is an individual defendant or the government of the state or country that you are representing.
It's completely true. And I think you made a really compelling point, and the thing that, again, it's easy to apply this also because, I mean, we're law students, so like this is a, you know, a personal experience for us, and we see the immediate benefit of it. But so I agree with you that there's been this push in education and culture in general about this concept of, you were saying, the unique experiences, your, you know, whatever it is, your personal flaws, whatever they might be, it's all yours, and individualism, if you will. And individualism is fine. It's beautiful. It's one of the qualities that I think makes human society so great. But I do agree with you. There are points in life, there are certain things where we have to have thresholds, and it's you know, the rule of law school. You know what I mean? You're coming into class, you're going to get cold called on. The professor doesn't care that it's going to make you uncomfortable. The judge, when you're getting up and trying to make a you know, you're doing an oral argument on a motion, and the judge cuts you off and talks to you, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. But that's life is uncomfortable. And so I think that there's also utility in realizing that you can take those unique experiences, those unique feelings, and the real skill of lawyering, I believe, and just about any profession, is learning the rules of the game and then using your perspective and playing the game within the rules, and using your passions, your fears, your anxieties, whatever it is, to drive you in the path that you forge and whatever it is that you do. But when we're all learning how to do that thing, whether it's in school or an extracurricular club or whatever it is, the whole should not have to cater to the one or the few. You know, I know that's a scalding hot take to some people, but I mean, you're talking to a guy that spends his days reading law. It's the law is quite, it's called quite literally black letter law, black and white. That's what we do.
No, and now you might read the headline, and we'll get into our first story, and you might say, how do these two things connect? But we're going to talk a little bit about the Boy Scouts of America announcing their rebrand to Scouting America to make it more inclusive. And this is a story from CNN. I'm going to read a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit. So, according to CNN, the Boy Scouts of America announced Tuesday that it will change its name to Scouting America next February to emphasize its commitment to inclusion. The youth organization said the new name was meant to help everyone, including boys and girls, feel welcome. It will be changed on February 8th, 2025, which is the organization's 115th anniversary. A spokesperson, the chief executive officer of the Boy Scouts of America, said that the rebranding, quote, won't change the organization's missions for preparing the young people over their lives to make ethical and moral choices by instilling the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. America's values are Scouting values. The girls were first able to join the Cub Scouts, the organization on the lower, like for the younger children, in 2018, and then in 2019 they recognized older girls from 11 to 17 to be parts of Scouts BSA, the Boy Scouts of America. At the time, the Boy Scouts of America said the program's expansion had been requested for years and was aimed at helping busy families consolidate programs for their children. Crone said he now believes it's time for the organization to have a name that better reflects the youth who are currently involved in their program. There are currently 20% of their program is young women. The story goes on, but I think that gets enough of the gist. And there's just two things that I really want to point out that in that article. They mentioned that 2025 will be the 115th anniversary of the Boy Scouts of America. 115 years of this institution. And then 3 paragraphs later, they say, we're not changing our mission that we've always had, which was, and then to quote them, they said, preparing the young people of America in these ways. But that is not the mission that they had for 115 years. No, that's only the mission that they've had for the last 6 years. What the mission was is to prepare young boys to go into society and have these values, right? And now you might say, but AJ, like young girls could have these values too. And you're right. They very well could have these values. And that's why there's the Girl Scouts of America. And if you really wanted this inclusive environment, like they're saying, Scouting America could be its own institution that isn't the Boy Scouts of America. Because for 111 years, the Boy Scouts of America has been catering to young boys as a place for young boys to go and be outside with other young boys and grow up and camp and learn survival skills with other young men and boys. And I know that we live in a society today where we have to pretend that boys and girls are exactly the same in every way. But again, like we just talked about earlier, when something has been going on for, in this case, even longer than the Boy Scouts of America have been a thing, 110 years, right? 150, almost 115 years, and 100 and what, about 110. It was just catering to boys, but even longer than that. Since the dawn of civilization, practically, we have recognized that it is good. Not only is it good, it is proper that we have institutions that women do together and men do together, independent of each other, especially at the ripe ages of these young men and women. Right? Like, okay, let's think about this for a little bit. What do you think is going to happen when you put a bunch of 12 to 17-year-old boys and girls out in the middle of the woods together under the direction of like 20-year-old camp counselors? Let's use our imaginations, folks. Like, what do you think is going to happen? A lot of things that, we're not naive. We were that age. They happen anyway, but it's okay to have institutions built so that it separates those things, so that young boys can learn and grow in relationships with other men. Because whether we like it or not, the relationships that men have with each other and the relationships that women have with each other, and then the relationships that men and women have together with each other, they're all different. They have different dynamics, and there's different ways to communicate. I have a lot of female friends, girlfriends, a lot of them. I don't talk to them the same way that I talk to Steven or my other guy friends, because you communicate differently. And that doesn't, because everybody does that. And you might not want to admit it. You might want to hide behind something and say, like, I don't do that. I would never do that. I treat everybody the same. Yeah, all right, pal. Maybe you actually just don't have any friends. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I think it's a shame. It's a shame that we're taking away these opportunities from these young men. And then also the Girl Scouts of America is losing out here of a place for young women to go and young girls to go and learn the same thing. When at the end of the day, if they really wanted this big inclusive, just like create a third organization that's catered to this, if that's your goal. But why do you have to go in and take a classic American institution and change it? Why? Give me a good reason why you couldn't just start a third organization. Instead, you have to destroy the girls' organization, like we've seen time and time again, at the expense of the actual girls' organization and the boys' organization. You're going to do this. Maybe, Steven, you can shed some light on this for me.
I'm unfortunately not going to be able to do that for you, because I feel quite similarly, actually. And so what troubles me about this more than anything, so first, I think it's important to know the history. Obviously, like you said, this is an organization that's been around for a long time. It was actually predicated is a poor choice of words. It was based on a similar club that was, founded out in England in 1908, I believe. And so even the history of the English, it's called the Boy Scout or the Boys Association. I'm forgetting what it is. The Scout Association. My bad. had several transformations throughout the existence of that organization where they, went through these periods of inclusion. And I'm not going to I'm not going to lie to you here. The Boy Scouts of America has a touchy history with race inclusion. And so to parallel the conversation we were talking before, there are clearly inclusions that are necessary in society. To preclude people from participating in groups because of their race is morally corrupt. It's wrong. It's objectionable. Everybody knows this, right? And I would agree that there are certain situations and certain spaces, obviously, where if you do that by sex or gender, it is also just as morally objectionable. Like everybody should be able to go into the same supermarket, like basic things.
Sure.
But when we're talking about the development and growth of young people, right? And this is what gets me about this is these kids don't know what kind of experiences they're missing out on. And I think that that's what hurts people. I mean, I was never a Boy Scout, so I'm not really speaking from much experience, at least with this organization.
I was a Boy
But
Scout.
Okay. See, there we go. AJ, I'm sure that you have plenty of great memories about what that was like and all of the trips. And, I know you had two older brothers. I'm sure it was great for relationships with them and everything. And you meet so many great people and you learn so many skills and you're able to be a boy. It's like you'd hear parents say it all the time. Oh, it's just boys being boys, like it's a joke sometimes, but if you say that in the wrong space, then you're a sexist. Like it's weird how we treat this issue. And so my whole point on this is I think it hurts people because I guarantee you most people our age are not of the opinion that this is a bad thing. And I believe that it's the people who grew up with this institution, the dads that were the troop leaders and got to see all their sons go through it and all the great things and experiences that come out of it, see an organization that gave so much to them, they gave so much to, that they loved because of what it meant, what it stood for, the things that it taught the kids, the experience that it gave the kids is a completely different thing. And it happened in their lifetime. And so I think that they're going to be extremely angry about the experiences now that their grandchildren aren't going to be able to have. And to your point, I would say for no good reason, because again, like you said, it's just as easy. Make a third organization. We have the Boy Scouts. We have the Girl Scouts. Make a third Scouting America. Why do we need to get rid of something that already exists? And then the internet people, I'll save you the breath. You can call me whatever you're going to call me, a sexist, whatever. It's fine. Does that mean then we're also getting rid of the Girl Scouts? If we're getting rid of one and we're getting rid of the other, and if we're going for inclusion, we should just save resources and give all those kids the best shot and consolidate it into one, right? Or are the boys now allowed to join the Girl Scouts? Like I don't know how these things proceed forward. And I think just even thinking about it for 1 second makes you realize how silly it all is.
But Stephen, not only like let's just be abundantly clear. This doesn't get rid of the Girl Scouts because of like some of any other reason other than like whenever something like this happens in the name of inclusion and in the name of some sort of like I don't know, I guess like feministic virtue signal, maybe. I don't even really know. It always comes at the expense of the women's only area. Because in our country, and this might be like a very hot take and a very controversial thing, but I think it's wrong, and so I'm just gonna put it out there. Like it seems like in this country and in society as a whole, when we talk about like what is good in society, we talk a lot about like things that are very ideas that are very like male centric, right? Like we act like the Girl Scouts and the values that they're teaching these young girls are like not as worthy as what the Boy Scouts are teaching young boys, like these survival, like because like think about what the Boy Scouts are doing. They're doing these like survivalist skills, these things that are traditionally very masculine, like going out into the woods and camping and learning how to hunt and shoot and there's like more power dynamics at play and more physical attributes at play. And it's not to say that like women aren't capable of these things, but like the Girl Scouts is much more of it seemingly from an outsider looking in, it seems much more of an academic space. It seems much more of a community driven space. It seems like they learn more traditionally women oriented things like sewing and knitting, which but like why are we pretending that like the girls need to join the Boy Scouts so they get the opportunities that the boys get when both of these things are important and we need a society that has both of these things going on at the same time to function and be well and be good, right? And so we consistently see this trend where it's like, okay, we need to be more inclusive, so we're going to shove everybody into the male center categories. And then where does that leave these more traditionally feminine roles? As lesser? Because I don't think they're lesser. You know what I mean? I think that they're just as important, if not arguably more. But it seems like every time we're at this crossroads, we say, forget about that, and we're going to push down this road in the name of feminism. And it's very weird to me.
I would agree with you. And not for nothing, I mean, just for the purposes of this conversation, right? So the Boy Scouts founded in 1910, the Girl Scouts founded in 1912. So we're talking about an organization with just as much history, same values. I mean, you could quite literally do a quick Google search and it'll tell you that Girl Scouts engage in practically the same activities as the Boy Scouts do: camping, first aid, all of those basic survival skills. And not for nothing, I think one of the obviously one of the joys of the Girl Scouts is the business that they teach these young women by their ability to sell those incredibly delicious cookies. So you know what? Maybe I'm in favor of keeping the Girl Scouts. If we're getting rid of the Boy Scouts, at least we get the cookies still, right? That's like a plus of this whole thing. But in all seriousness, I think it is a valid point that you say, and why the inclusion has to happen on the male centric things, I think is, I don't really have a good explanation for that. I think that there's probably some really compelling, I don't even know what kind of people would write about something like that.
People that are canceled and not allowed to speak anymore, but are actually like real feminists in a way, and not like the modern feminists that we see of today, where I think like an actual, if you truly believe in women and the importance of women and femininity, like you would be fighting against losing women's only spaces. Like I think that we're not looking at this the right way. It's not that like we shouldn't have men and women together interacting. It's that it's good also to have men and women interact with only men and women. Like both of these things are true. And I think you made this point earlier, where it's like, yeah, okay, we shouldn't have men's only supermarkets, but that doesn't mean that it's a problem to have men's only clubs and women's only clubs.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, this obvious, again, parallel opens the floodgates for another issue. But for sports are another perfect example, I believe, where it would genuinely be unfair for men to compete. And I mean, all right, I was going to say volleyball, but some of those volleyball girls are actually pretty tall. But I'm 6'1".
They don't hit the ball as hard as the men.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm 6'1". I'm a tall guy. I got some athleticism in me. I could jump. I got a good swat. It would be devastation if I went and played at a comparable skill level. Granted, I'm not a volleyball aficionado.
Volleyball player, sure.
Yeah, but the point remains that there are certain limitations. I mean, we quite literally have a different chromosomal makeup, and so that implies that there's just simply differences that separate these two sexes. And so we require different things growing up. Different things stimulate those masculine and feminine traits in people, and then their desires and whatever it is. And so I think that the heinous crime here is the fact that children are being deprived of their ability to experience those things. If you make it, you're a teenager and you want to go do co-ed everything and that option's available for you, fine, by all means. You've had your experiences, you've learned this, that, whatever. But young boys who maybe just want to hang out and be around other young boys. I mean, I remember when I was like, I don't know, you go through that stage, you're like, ew, girls are gross. Meh, 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 meh. Like every young boy does.
Right.
And now, every Thursday night when you're supposed to go down to the troop house and, see all your boys from school and do whatever, it's like, oh, man, the gross girls in there, because we're kids and that's what we think and we don't know any better. And that's really what it is these kids don't know any better and they're being deprived of experiences and connections with like-minded groups of people that traditionally, historically, have proven to instill great values in both of the sexes and genders. So everything that I just said is equally as true for the Girl Scouts as it is for the Boy Scouts. This is not one's better than the other. They provide the same thing. And the fact that they are secluded from each other, I believe, is a good thing. If you want a fully inclusive, everybody do what you want to do, and create the third organization. But for those that desire that for their children, that option should exist for them.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you think that the third organization is right and it's the true and the best way to do it, then your organization is going to beat the other two out anyway. But you know what? Here's the thing, Stephen. They know that it won't. Because they understand that people understand that it's good for young boys to have the Boy Scouts, and they bring their sons to the Boy Scouts, and then they drop their daughters off to the Girl Scouts, and they know that people do that, and that's a good thing, and that people understand that that's a good thing. Just innately in us, we get that to be true. So they know that if they just created a third organization, it just wouldn't work. It wouldn't gain steam because people would be like, no, we should, there should be a little bit of a separation here. It's good to have a little bit of a separation here. But Stephen, I want to go to a next story, which might seem a bit unrelated, but I have a point that I want to make, and it's a more overarching point. I think it goes with the whole show. So this story comes out of the Asbury Park Press, and it's about an old piece of American history that may be gone forever soon. And it's a 320-year-old house in which is off of Sloop Creek Road in Berkeley Township. It's called the Anderson Farmhouse, and it was a site of a Revolutionary War assassination, and they say it's on its last legs. A local historian had grown up in this section of Bayville, which is in this section of Berkeley, and now they're a student at Monmouth University, and he wrote his master's thesis all about this farmhouse. And he basically said, like, at one point this was worth saving, but now it's pretty far gone. And an advocacy group called Preservation New Jersey has ranked the Anderson Farmhouse as number 3 on its annual list of the state's 10 most endangered historical sites. And basically New Jersey's on the cusp of losing this. And it is falling apart. It's clearly old. It's overgrown. It hasn't been taken much care of. I'm going to share my screen quick just so you can look at the pictures from this. And then I'm going to get to my overarching point as to why I brought up this story. So here you can see the picture of the house from the side. This is actually a pretty good looking photo of it. And then you see it from the other side and you see how it's falling apart. I think this might be the worst picture where you see really how it's boarded up. It's overgrown. It's a 320-year-old house, right? But Stephen, the reason I bring this story up, and I want to talk about it, and I think that it makes sense in the context of this show, is the fact that the United States of America is a very young country on the broad scheme of things. This building is 320 years old. And we've let it fall apart. It's in our backyard. I went to high school in Bayville, right? Like, this is probably a house. I didn't even know it was in the town where I went to high school and middle school, right? It's a 320-year-old house with a Revolutionary War assassination. You would think that that would come up in an American history class in the high school where the house is located, like the township that the house is located, and it didn't. And my point is, like, the American Revolution wasn't that long ago. The house is only 320 years old, and it's falling apart, and we're going to get rid of it. And it's just another thing that we're going to lose in our history. And I think it's just so troubling because our country has been doing the best it can, it seems, at forgetting where we came from. And I think that that's a really troubling thing. And we talked about the Boy Scouts of America. We had the conversation earlier about cold calling and the importance of that. And now you're talking about a Revolutionary War in a Jersey Shore iconic property that we're going to have to tear down and get rid of and forget about. Not because of some natural disaster, not because of some fire, but because we were lazy and we didn't preserve and we didn't remember the past and where we came from and tell the story of our country and its founding, when at the same time we could take a leap across the Atlantic Ocean. You can walk around the entirety of Europe, and that can tell the entire history of those peoples, right? You can walk into the Colosseum, a place where thousands of years ago people were going to sporting events. Like, Madison Square Garden is like 150 years old. You know what I mean? And it's been redone dozens of times. And that's like I think that's like a fair comp to something in America that like hosts these major sporting events, right? And in a major city. The Colosseum is still standing thousands of years later. Is Madison Square Garden? Are we going to be able to say the same thing? You know, my bigger point is that we used to build things to last. That was the point of why we built them. So that they would last forever. So that people would continue to take care of them. They would remember where they came from. They would be proud of where they came from. That's why we built these great buildings in Washington, D.C. of marble and stone that lasted a long time. The same marble and stone that they built ancient Greece out of, that our founders looked to the past to build our country based on, that we can still walk the streets of Athens to look at, where Socrates and Plato and Aristotle walked on the same cobble streets. We once did that in this country. We cared about that. We wanted that. And now, just 320 years later, which really isn't that long, we have let these buildings fall apart. Like they don't even matter. Like the history doesn't matter. Like where we come from doesn't matter. We don't even teach it to the kids who could take a walk down and see the site themselves. Why?
Again, I don't think I have a good answer for you, AJ. Listen, I everything that you said, I mean, I almost feel bad having to follow that up. You know what I mean? Like, because it's so true. And the one word that popped into my head, and I wrote it down while you were talking, is when you go anywhere in Europe, literally anywhere in Europe, and the Colosseum is a perfect example. You look at the Colosseum, and for me, I've been there, I've seen it. I know you've done the same. It was a sense of wonder. It was like, oh my goodness, I am enamored by this object and the culture that it represents and the people that have come and seen it before me thousands of years. You look at the pyramids, it's the same, concept. It's these structures that are, strong societies put their mark and they say, we were here. This is what we stood for. This is what we believed. And even when we're dead and gone, our values are so strong, they will remain forever. memorialized in this stone, in this building, in this structure, whatever it might be. And so I think that concept of wonder, right, is what I extract from that. And the reason why I believe I'm able to discern at least a little bit that we don't feel that about this country, I truly believe has something to do with what we teach our children. And there's a lot of American history, there's a lot of world history. I'll say this much: most of history isn't pretty, isn't kind. Humans are not very, kumbaya people. I know we want to believe we are, and in our personal lives, we should strive to be. But collective history of our species and our cultures, we are brutal people. We are not nice to each other. And it that, permeates. And so there's a lot of ugly things that have happened in American history, things that, as a society, we aren't proud of, and we own that, and we become better than that. And that's why we are where we are now, and forever working and striving to uphold the ideals that this country was founded on, that every man's created equal, they have certain inalienable rights, and, wonderful virtues to base society off of, in my opinion. But we've taught people for a very long time that, yeah, the founding fathers are a great idea, and it's appropriate because it's a Revolutionary War building. Yeah, they wrote the Constitution, but Thomas Jefferson had slaves. And I think if you're a young person, or you're not necessarily well read on the topics and understand much of this, it's a compelling argument to be made. It's like, oh, well, he must have been a bad guy. Well, Thomas Jefferson, unfortunately, didn't have the same social and cultural values as you, because that was 250 years ago. And so for us to shame and wag our fingers at the past and the people who built all of these great things that our society now rests upon, is quite literally the foundation of everything that we enjoy today. To sit here and, shame these people and throw dirt on their names that is highly circumstantial to the societies that they lived in at the time, I think creates a culture in children of lack of appreciation for the history of where they are from. And it's really tragic, and it's really sad, because you can look at the bad and look at the good, acknowledge the bad. If we've not completely rectified the issues that the bad has caused, be a champion for that. But also, you can't ignore the good. And so I think that, it's a culture that's just been created and permeated as a way of, by the way that we tell, the ugly histories of this country, which are important to tell 100%, but it shouldn't take away and detract from the good and the importance of the foundations of this country. And I think this is true for anywhere, not just America. Like, I think every country should strive to acknowledge the bad, embrace the good, and believe in your culture, support your culture, the things, your virtues, your values that, everybody within your borders believes and agrees upon. Make a mark. That's what we're here to do. We're here to make an impact and be a force for good in any way that we can. I truly believe that.
Yeah, Steve, really quick. I think that I wanna just touch on that point and highlight it, because I was in a lecture the other day with a history professor from the University of Pennsylvania. He came to Villanova. He spoke to us. His name was Kermit Roosevelt. He wrote a book about the refounding of America, and talking about how we should be teaching our children not of the founding fathers of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, but instead of the founding fathers of like Abraham Lincoln, and that era of the refounding. And it's an interesting topic, and I don't necessarily disagree with his contention that like the Civil War was a second revolution, and it was like kind of a refute. His argument is that he's kind of a refute of the original revolution, and it sort of lived up. But where I think I disagreed with him, and he thinks that he laid it out brilliantly, but I just don't know if I necessarily agree. Is that his argument is like the founders didn't actually really believe in the ideals that they were saying. They were just kind of like boilerplate modern liberalism talk of the time. Everybody kind of knew it. It was like the John Stuart Mill, John Lockean, like boilerplate, just platitudes. That was his argument. I disagree with it because I think that all of the points in American history where we started to see a shift in a positive direction, whether that was the Abraham Lincoln or whether that was your Martin Luther King Jr. or your Susan B. Anthony, or pick your icon of of sort of a revolution, whether it's a social revolution or an actual civil war, like with Lincoln, they've all harkened back to that original idea that you mentioned, that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by our creators by certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and we all know it, right? There's a reason why they all go back to the same language, because that language is right. Because the country that we're built on is built on the right ideas, the right ideals, right? George Washington, he's the father of freedom, and he didn't understand till he was literally laying on his deathbed. He could not comprehend that his slaves were just as much men as he, and they wanted freedom just the same as he did. He didn't get it because the society that he grew up in and was raised in and lived in didn't really allow him to get it. And I think this is really the point that I want to make, and I want to come down to. It's like, who are we? Who are we to pretend like there's not something that we're all doing, that we all think is perfectly fine, that in 250 years they're going to look back at us and be like, wow, they were some real jerk-offs back then. And who knows what that is? Maybe that's eating meat, Who knows? I don't know. But maybe animals, like in 250 years, we look at mammals in particular as having equal rights to human beings. I don't know. Maybe we do. And then to us, where eating meat is just like normal everyday life, not that big of a deal. There's a hamburger shop on every corner. McDonald's is selling 1 billion burgers in, their history. That's like this brutal, awful institution that's full of something, that's immoral and awful. And then who are we? We're just a bunch of bad guys now. Even if we are trying our best and we're trying to live a good life, we're all bad. But because of the society we live in, that we don't realize it's bad. And look, I'm not, like, obviously holding slaves is bad, and we should condemn that, and we should point it out, and we should be like, that was wrong and evil of them. 100%. I'm not here to say anything other than that. My point is, you're not that much better. And the only reason you are better is because we learned from the mistakes that were made in the past. And they were brutal and awful mistakes. I'm not here to say they aren't. But as soon as you forget where you come from and why you know that they're bad, you're going to start falling into the same traps. And I hate to say it, but when you look at our Ivy League institutions and their separate white and black graduations for these students, it seems like the people that are pushing for that, which are of a particular political persuasion, and I'll let you do the research to figure out which people are pushing these all black graduations. It seems like they're the same people that are forgetting where they came from. And the reason and the language that was used to fight for the equal rights of all Americans. It's the first ones to cast the stones against your Thomas Jeffersons and your George Washingtons.
That's entirely correct. That is entirely correct. I truthfully, I don't even think I have anything to add to that, if I'm going to be 100% honest with you, because I agree with every single word that you said, and I think. Actually, you know what? The only thing I will add is I think that it is incumbent upon us to be good orators of our own history and make sure, and I think that's why what we do is important, is to make sure that those values that you believe are correct and right. And I mean, we have an incredible military. Historically, many people have died for those ideals. And so for us to turn around and treat the people who believed in them the same way, like you said, but who were just, participants in a society that they didn't recognize was, maybe morally askew, to cast negative light on them and treat those people as poor when they believe just as much as I do that every man and woman was made equal and we have certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is just yeah, no good, no bueno, no bueno to do that.
Look, I think that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers of that generation, they were on the right track, right? It's like you're on a train track and you're going in the right direction. You just haven't reached your destination yet, right? And Abraham Lincoln took up the mantle and kept it going. And Martin Luther King Jr. and Susan B. Anthony did the same thing in the 20th century. And there will be thinkers and people in the 21st century who do the same. And they will like push us down this path of doing what is right and morally good. But like it's literally just looking at all of the bad things your parents have ever done for you and forgetting all of the good things that they did to bring you into the person that you are. And I think it's really troubling because if we want to like let's look at somebody who look at Martin Luther King Jr. Like he wasn't a perfect guy. There's plenty of credible allegations that he was an adulterer and he was a cheater on his wife. And look at Mahatma Gandhi, who we look at as this virtue, this paragon of moral virtue, and he was a brutal misogynist and sexist. Like these men aren't perfect. These people aren't perfect because there's no such thing as a perfect person. So we look at the bad, we acknowledge the bad, but we take the good and we run with it. And you can't forget it. And that's what we're doing. The building is just a marker of that.
I was going to say the building is just a symbol of it's a symptom of a larger disease that I think is afflicting, truthfully, this entire country. It has been for a really long time. And like I said, I think it's incumbent upon us to be good orators of our history, to continue to honor those values, fight for the, like you said, take the good and run with it. And, to a certain degree we do. And we just need to be better at that. And I think the more conversations that we have with each other as neighbors and friends and people who believe, different things politically, we need to have those conversations so that we can get down to what are those big boilerplate concepts that we all can agree on. Find the good in that, and let's all start running with that. And together, we can forge the right path forward while still honoring those great things that came before us. I think that's the right way to do it. And so it really comes back to what we teach our kids and the opportunities that we afford our children. I think that's the burden that every great citizen bears when we have such a, I don't know what the word I want to use right now is, but a volatile system where, in one generation, the way that we look at things can be completely different for better or for worse. And so I think we need to just be a little bit more careful about the changes that we seek and how we go about accomplishing that.
Absolutely, Stephen. But look, unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we do have to wrap up. But I think that's a beautiful way to end. I think you're absolutely correct. We're all in this together. We all want our country to move in the right direction. We all want the best thing. I truly believe that, at least on an individual citizen level, that is true. So, without anything else, you can catch all your Jersey First content on jerseyfirst.org. You can check us out on YouTube, on Vimeo, on Spotify. I would just search Jersey First TV. And you can also check us out on NJ. But for Bridging the Gap and Jersey First TV, I'm AJ Malillo.
I'm Steve Rambolo.
And have a good week, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.